There's something sacred about the hours when the world falls silent. These are the hours when men remember who they are, not through striving, not through noise, but through stillness. Tonight isn't about learning something new. It's about remembering what you've always known. That strength doesn't come from control, peace doesn't come from escape, and healing doesn't come from forgetting. You've walked through storms, carried ghosts, chased meaning through every doorway life offered. You were never lost. You were only becoming. In this long journey ahead, we'll move through 4 awakenings: discipline, stillness, silence, and finally rebirth. Each one a chapter in your return to yourself. So close your eyes, let go of the day, just listen, and let the words find you. Because sometimes transformation doesn't arrive with fire, it arrives with rest. And if you're ready, we begin now. You keep fixing what was never broken. The jewel, the house, the body, the reputation. You polish everything until nothing feels alive anymore. But the race was never against others. It was against your own refusal to rest. But the truth is simpler and quieter. Peace doesn't come when life is perfect. It comes when you stop trying to make it so. You don't have to abandon ambition. Just stop confusing ambition with obsession. You can build, but don't worship what you build. You can care, but don't drown in what you care for. The Stoics didn't aim for flawlessness. They aimed for flow, harmony between what they can control and what they can't. Seneca wrote to be calm is the highest achievement of the soul. He never said to be perfect. If you want clarity this year, stop editing your life. Live it. Let the rough edges remind you you're still real. Peace doesn't come from control. It comes from the version of you that returns wiser after the fall. You can't control who hurts you, who misunderstands you, or who walks away without explanation. But you can control what version of yourself comes back afterward. That's the difference between chaos and composure. Not how fast you react, but how wisely you return. Most people think strength is loud. They confuse reaction with power. They believe that shouting louder wins the argument, that replying faster wins the respect, that being right means being at peace, but the truth is quieter. Sometimes walking away from the noise isn't weakness, it's warfare. People say, I had to defend myself, but most of the time, what we're defending is our ego wearing a moral costume. True defense isn't noise. It's knowing what doesn't deserve your explanation. There was a man at a coffee shop one morning. He got cut off in line by someone too busy scrolling his phone. He sighed, stepped back, said nothing. The barista looked at him, surprised, and said, "You're not gonna say anything." He smiled. "I'm saving my energy for things that matter." That moment stayed with me, because peace isn't born from perfection, it's born from choosing your battles. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control. You can't change the referee, but you can change your game. You can't control the crowd's noise, but you can control your shot selection. And here's what most people never realize. Even the worst day can't ruin you if you don't let it decide your response. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters." We quote it so often that we forget how radical it is. He wasn't telling you to be calm. He was reminding you to be conscious. Because real discipline isn't holding your breath through pain. It's moving through it with awareness. You will be tested by traffic, by betrayal, by unfairness, by people who still live as if anger proves existence. When that happens, don't ask, "Why me?" Ask, "What version of me will handle this?" For one full day, don't rush to respond to discomfort. Don't correct, defend, or explain. Just observe how your mind moves. You'll see the space between stimulus and reaction is where peace hides. Every comeback doesn't need an audience. Some are meant only for your own evolution, because the world doesn't remember how quickly you reacted. It remembers how gracefully you return. Most people don't lack time, they lack direction. Hours slip through them because they think purpose will announce itself one day, but it never does. Neuroscientists found something strange. The brain doesn't release dopamine when you reach a goal. It releases it while you're moving toward one. That means happiness never lived at the finish line. It lives in motion, in the quiet moment you decide to start, in the next small step you take. The Stoics treated dawn like a conversation with themselves. Marcus wrote, "At daybreak, remember you are rising to do the work of a human being." He didn't say a businessman or a hero, just a human. That's enough. Try waking up before the noise, not to be productive, but to be present. Read, write, think, or just watch the light shift from gray to gold. That quiet hour isn't about doing more. It's about remembering you have a choice before the world starts asking things from you. That's the real power of dawn. It doesn't give you more hours, it gives you ownership. The first light doesn't ask who you are. It reminds you what you've become while sleeping through your purpose. Funny thing, when you rise early, you stop chasing time and start directing it. You stop reacting and start deciding. Set your alarm 15 minutes earlier. Dawn isn't just the start of a day, it's a mirror. It shows who you are before the world tells you who to be. You can wake up on time, answer every email, hit every deadline, and still feel like your life is standing still. I used to think busyness was purpose, and my calendar agreed. Turns out I was just decorating my confusion with productivity, because movement without direction is just noise that looks like progress. We confuse activity with purpose the same way we confuse noise with music, and most people spend half their life performing tasks that don't even belong to them. There was a man, let's call him Thomas. Every morning, he'd wake up before sunrise, make coffee, read the news, scroll through a dozen opinions that never changed his own. He went to work, came home. He spent 10 hours building spreadsheets he didn't care about, then spent 2 hours scrolling through comments on a social media post he didn't even write. His exhaustion was real, but it was purchased for the wrong master. He was never lazy, just lost in a cycle that rewarded exhaustion more than meaning. One evening, his daughter asked him, "Dad, what do you love most about what you do?" He didn't know what to say. He smiled, the kind of smile people use to hide an echo. Purpose is not a slogan you write on a wall. It's the quiet pulse beneath every choice you make. When you lose it, even victories feel empty. When you find it, even struggle feels sacred. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, remember that your purpose is to work as a human being." He didn't mean keep grinding. He meant remember who you are when you move. Because discipline without direction is just punishment in disguise. The world keeps telling you to do more. Stoicism whispers, do what matters. And what matters isn't always louder, but it's always lighter on the heart. Your purpose won't scream at you. It will wait patiently beneath the noise until you finally stop running long enough to listen. The world has confused motion with meaning. People move all day, but most of it leads nowhere. They mistake exhaustion for progress and noise for importance. I once watched a man at a coffee shop, 2 phones, 1 laptop, his eyes bouncing between screens like a trapped bee. He looked powerful. Power without peace is just another disguise for panic. But when he stood up, he sighed like someone who hadn't truly lived a single moment that day. We worship busyness because silence exposes our emptiness. We say we're so busy as if it proves we matter. But busyness is the new form of fear, the fear of meeting yourself. The Stoics did not measure life by how much they did. They measured it by how deeply they did it. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Every hour filled with noise is an hour stolen from meaning." This year, don't aim for a full calendar. Aim for a full heart. Let purpose be your filter. If it doesn't build your center or serve your soul, it's just another distraction disguised as duty. You don't need more time. You just need fewer things stealing it. Purpose begins where noise ends. Every moment you quiet the world, your soul starts speaking again. Anna used to call everyone my rock. Her boyfriend, her friends, her therapist, even her favorite podcast host. She built her peace on borrowed strength and couldn't understand why her world kept shaking. When someone didn't text back, she fell apart. When her boss frowned, she doubted her worth. When life was silent, she panicked, as if silence itself were rejection. One day, she said something that stayed with him. "I just wish someone would tell me what to do." I told her gently, "You don't need another voice. You need to hear your own, because when you outsource your decisions, you also outsource your dignity. Every time you ask, 'What should I do?' you're handing the steering wheel to someone who might not even know your road." The Stoics warned, the man who depends on others for peace will always be at war with himself. Marcus Aurelius lived this truth, surrounded by servants and soldiers, yet every night he wrote not to others, but to his own mind. Self-reliance isn't an isolation. It's alignment with your own reason, your own rhythm. So stop rehearsing helplessness. No one else is coming to lift you. They can lend a hand, but not a spine, because the world respects a voice that doesn't tremble, waiting for approval. And when you stop waiting for permission, you start walking your own path, quietly, but completely. Most people quit too soon, not because they have lost interest, but because they have lost applause. We live in an age that glorifies starting and forgets staying. The first week of anything feels holy. New gym, new dream, new love. But the sacred part is what happens after the excitement dies. I remember nearly quitting something I deeply loved, not because it stopped working, but because I stopped being praised for it. That's how fragile my purpose had become, dependent on echoes instead of conviction. Silence became the mirror that asked, "Would you still do this if no one was watching?" If you only keep what's easy, you'll never know what's real. Anything worth keeping will eventually ask for patience, discipline, and loneliness. The Stoics called it endurance of the good. They didn't chase inspiration. They built consistency until it became devotion. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." In modern words, stop asking, "Should I continue?" Ask, "Would I respect myself if I quit?" Love and mastery share a rule. Stay, especially when applause disappears. There once was an archer, known across the land for his precision. On windless days, his arrows split other arrows. Crowds gathered just to watch the perfection. But one morning, a storm arrived. The air roared, branches swayed, and his first arrow veered wildly off target. The people laughed. The archer's face flushed red. He shouted at the sky, "You ruined my aim." An old monk watching nearby smiled and said, "The wind didn't ruin your aim. It revealed the truth that you were never aiming through the wind, only through comfort." The next day, the archer returned. He stood in the same storm, breathed with the wind instead of against it. and released another arrow. It landed closer than before, still imperfect, but earned. That's what discipline really is. Not mastering the calm, but staying steady in the storm. We all have our own wins: traffic, rejection, deadlines, heartbreak, noise. Maybe yours isn't outside. Maybe your wind is an old memory that still shakes your hands every time you try again. But even that wind can teach balance. If you stop fighting and start breathing with it, and every time we lose patience, we blame the weather, not the weakness within. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't hope that life becomes easier. Hope that you become equal to its challenges." Because stillness isn't built in quiet rooms. It's built where the wind screams the loudest. The strongest archers don't wait for calm skies. They learn to aim while the branches shake. There was once a powerful man in a small town, the kind everyone feared but secretly admired. One afternoon, he caught a young boy stealing apples from his yard. The boy froze, ready for the punishment he thought he deserved. But the man didn't shout. He looked at the boy's torn shirt, at his shaking hands clutching 3 apples like they were life itself. He sighed and said quietly, "Take them, but promise me next time, ask." The boy nodded and ran. No one heard of him again. Years passed. One night, the same man was stranded by the side of the road, his car broken, rain pouring. A stranger stopped to help. The headlights lit the man's face, and the stranger smiled. "Do you remember the boy who stole your apples?" The man couldn't speak. The stranger said, "You taught me something that day. Kindness doesn't forget." And just like that, the stranger fixed his car and left, disappearing back into the storm. Most people think kindness makes you soft, but kindness is the sharpest form of wisdom. It sees beyond the moment. It doesn't need applause, because it already understands justice without noise. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." The world will always tempt you to answer harshness with harshness, but strength is proven in restraint. Kindness doesn't mean letting people cross your boundaries. It means not crossing theirs, even when you could be kind when it's hardest. That's the kind that rewrites futures you'll never see. Kindness and forgiveness are twins. One softens the heart, the other frees it. Forgiveness doesn't start holy, it starts human. Most people think forgiving is about them, the ones who hurt us. But real forgiveness is about reclaiming the space they still occupy in your head. There was a woman, let's call her Lena. Her father left when she was 10. Every success she ever had was secretly a revenge performance. Every compliment, proof she didn't need him. But revenge is a heavy stage to live on. One day she saw an old photo, her father holding her as a baby, both smiling, neither knowing the story ahead. And for the first time, she didn't feel anger. She just felt tired. That was forgiveness. Not because he came back, but because she finally stopped rehearsing his absence. The Stoics said, "No one can injure you without your consent." They didn't mean the wound isn't real. They meant, stop letting it rent space in the home meant for peace. Forgiveness doesn't rewrite the past. It releases your future from its shadow. You can love someone from a distance, wish them well without reopening the door. Because peace doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it means release. Try this tonight. Write a name you still hold in resentment. Under it, write one lesson their pain taught you. Then whisper, "Thank you for the teaching. The class is over, tear the paper. Let it go." Forgiveness isn't saying it's fine. It's saying it's finished. Comfort is seductive. It makes you believe peace is found in repetition. But peace and growth don't live in the same room. Everything you want, courage, wisdom, meaning waits just beyond what you already know. Fear doesn't mean stop, it means this matters. Most people call the unknown dangerous, but the truth is it's only dangerous to the version of you that refuses to evolve. Fear guards every doorway worth walking through. It's the universe's way of checking if you're serious. The rest of you is waiting there, patient, ready. Say yes before you're ready. Say yes even when you shake a little. Because fear is not a wall, it's a doorway, and no one becomes whole standing in the hallway forever. Every time you step into the unknown, comfort whispers, stay. But peace waits on the other side. Comfort is clever. It doesn't destroy you with pain. It seduces you with pleasure, the good kind, the kind that feels deserved. We tell ourselves, I've worked hard, I earned this break. And we have. But the break became the habit, and the habit became the life. I once had a friend who used to run every morning. Then one winter he said, I'll wait till it's warmer. By spring, he was waiting for motivation. By summer, he was waiting for a sign. By autumn, he was still waiting. Comfort doesn't announce its arrival. It just slowly edits your standards until you no longer notice they're gone. And the cruel part? The world will applaud your comfort. Your friends will call it self-care. Your feed will call it balance. But deep down, you'll know it's decay wearing expensive pajamas. We've mastered the art of pampering ourselves into mediocrity. Gym memberships unused, unread books on mindfulness, half-finished dreams collecting digital dust. Stoicism teaches the opposite, that a soft life breeds a fragile mind. Seneca warned, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves comfort, who is poor." Because every luxury has a hidden tax. The more you rely on it, the weaker you become without it. Discipline isn't the enemy of peace. It's the architecture that holds it up. Without it, even joy collapses under its own weight. Once a week, do something mildly uncomfortable on purpose. Take the stairs, skip the elevator, wake up 10 minutes earlier than you need to. Not to prove strength, but to remind yourself you still have it. Because comfort is sweet, but like sugar, the more you taste it, the less you notice how it's ruining you. The Stoics called this soft slavery. You are not free if your peace is conditional on a soft life. Freedom is the readiness to face hardness. The Stoics didn't seek pain. They just refused to worship pleasure. When was the last time you were truly alone without feeling lonely? We used to wake up to the sound of birds. Now it's notifications. A world that promised connection has left everyone lonelier than ever. You scroll for a moment of peace, but each swipe steals another piece of your attention. Your mind isn't tired, it's overcrowded. I once saw a couple sitting together at dinner. No argument, no distance, just silence. Both of them smiling at screens while the food went cold between them. They weren't together, they were nearby. That's how distance begins. Not in miles, but in moments. Every minute you give away to distraction is a vote against your own clarity. Attention is your new currency. Spend it like your life depends on it, because it does. We're drowning in information, starving for insight. We mistake being informed for being aware, but wisdom has never been loud. It waits beneath the volume. We call it staying connected, but somehow we've never felt more alone while sharing everything. A friend once told me she listens to podcasts to fall asleep. I asked us why. She said, "Because silence makes me think too much." And that's the tragedy. We've become afraid of our own company. We now use noise as a shield against confronting our own unfinished thoughts. But the cost of this digital addiction is your greatest asset, the ability to think clearly. The Stoics called that fear by another name, dependence. If you can't sit in stillness without reaching for noise, you're not relaxing, you're escaping. As Epictetus taught, freedom begins where you master your attention. And attention today is the most stolen thing in the world. You don't have to mute the world forever. Just learn to lower the volume until you can hear yourself think. Because not every sound deserves your nervous system. Not every headline deserves your heartbeat. Most good deeds lose their power the moment we start waiting to be thanked. I once watched a man quietly repair a neighbor's broken fence. No one saw him. No one even knew who did it. Weeks later, someone else took the credit, and he just smiled. Maybe that's the highest form of peace, doing good that no one can trace back to you. That's the kind of peace applause can't buy. And yet, the moment you stop needing recognition, people start noticing anyway. Because silence has its own gravity. It pulls respect without asking for it. We help because it reminds us we still can. Because doing good keeps us from becoming bitter. Not because the world claps. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you have done a good act, remember another waits for you." Virtue isn't a performance. It's a rhythm. If you can give, give quietly. If you can care, care without keeping score. The ego wants witnesses. The soul just wants to serve. Service without credit is strength in disguise. You don't need applause to echo truth. Most people wait for someone else to go first. The leader, the mentor, the ideal version of who they could be, as if permission ever came from another human being. But what if the person you're waiting for is waiting for you? We talk about change like it's contagious, but no one wants to be the first carrier. Everyone wants a role model. No one wants to be one. I once met a man named Victor. He told me, "I wish my son had a better father." I asked him, what if he could by meeting one inside you? He looked down, smiled slowly, and whispered, "I never thought of that." That's the moment something shifts. When you stop seeking examples and start becoming them. Because the world doesn't need more advice. It needs living proof. Your colleagues don't need another quote. They need to see integrity. Your children don't need perfection. They need to see consistency. Your partner doesn't need promises. They need to feel peace when you walk in the room. The Stoics live by this. Virtue wasn't a lecture, it was a lifestyle. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be the calmest person in chaos, the kindest in conflict, the most grounded in uncertainty, not for applause, but for alignment. Because every time you choose restraint over reaction, grace over ego, discipline over desire, you raise the standard for what humanity can look like. Don't underestimate the power of one steady soul. Entire families heal because one person refused to repeat the cycle. Entire workplaces shift because one person stopped gossiping. Entire generations change because one parent finally chose awareness over anger. That's the quiet revolution, the one that starts inside you. Stop searching for heroes. They were ordinary people who simply stopped waiting. Think of one trait you admire most in others: patience, honesty, kindness, and do it today without waiting for the world to deserve it. Because becoming the example isn't about status. It's about service, not to others, but to the highest version of yourself. You don't need to tell the world you have changed. The world will feel it in the way you show up. So when in doubt, when the noise returns, when discipline fades, remember this: you are the proof, not the audience. You've spent half your life proving your worth to people who stopped thinking about you years ago. The chase for validation never ends. It just changes shape. Today it's success, tomorrow it's peace you're trying to earn. But you were worthy long before you were productive. That's the truth most men forget. The Stoics didn't seek approval. They sought alignment. They didn't ask, "Am I enough?" They asked, "Am I living by what I believe?" Stop auditing yourself like an unfinished project. The world will never hand you permission to rest. You have to give it to yourself. You're not behind, you're becoming. That's not a slogan. It's the quiet revolution of a man who finally stops chasing. If you've made it here, you've already done what most never do. You've stayed, not just through the video, but through every uncomfortable truth it carried. That's discipline too. The discipline to face yourself. You don't need to master all 10 Stoic principles tonight. You just need to remember one simple thing. You're not rebuilding a life. You're remembering how to live one. Maybe the world told you to be faster, stronger, louder. But all along, life just wanted you to be still enough to hear what it's been whispering, that you were never behind. You were simply being refined. The truth is, no one really starts over. We just start from now, a little wiser, a little quieter, a little less desperate to prove anything. And that's enough, because peace isn't found at the top of the mountain. It's found in the climb, in the quiet between trying and trusting, in the moments you choose to stay kind, even when it's easier not to. So here's your gift. When you close your eyes tonight, don't replay what went wrong. Replay what you survived, the strength that never made headlines, the quiet mornings you got up anyway. That's your proof, not the trophies, not the applause, just the fact that you're still here, trying, learning, returning. The Stoics call that virtue. Today, we just call it being human. If this journey found you at the right time, don't forget to pass it forward. Someone out there needs the calm you've earned. And when life gets loud again, come back here. The stillness will be waiting. You've faced your storms, and you've learned how to breathe again. But healing isn't the end, it's just the beginning of movement. Once peace stops feeling fragile, it turns into flow. And flow is where calm becomes strength. This next part isn't about surviving life, it's about directing it. Most people think power means controlling others, but the strongest man in any room is the one who controls himself. You can't control how your partner speaks to you, how your colleague misunderstands you, or how strangers treat you when they're lost in their own chaos. But you can control one small, invisible space, the moment between what happens and how you react. That's where your real freedom lives. On a busy street, I once watched a driver yell at another man for no reason. The man just looked at him, smiled slightly, and stepped aside. A few blocks later, the angry driver was stuck in traffic. The calm one kept walking free. Sometimes the real win is not joining the case. Remember this, when you control your reaction, you control your reputation. The one who can stay calm while others lose their temper doesn't win the argument. He wins himself. So next time someone provokes you, don't fight for the last word. Fight for the last moment of peace. That's how self-mastery begins. The test is simple. When provoked, do you protect your peace or your pride? Pride wants the last word. Peace wants the last sense. Choose sense. The room will feel it before they admit it. Most people think calm comes from meditation or books, but real calm appears the moment you realize no one can make you feel small without your permission. You've always had the power, you just kept giving it away. Peace begins where control ends. You don't lose power by letting go. You lose it by clinging. You know that moment when you've done everything. You wrote the message perfectly. You said the right words. You showed up with all your heart. And yet, silence answers back. That's the storm where most people lose their peace. Because we've been trained to believe that results are proof of worth. But life doesn't work like an algorithm. It's more like weather. You can plant the seed, but you don't control the rain. I've seen men destroy themselves trying to fix what wasn't broken. women chasing apologies that would never come, friends bending backward to keep connections that had already expired. We call it love, loyalty, persistence, but often it's just fear dressed in noble words. Fear loves costumes. Integrity doesn't. One builds pressure, the other builds peace. Let's change the lens. Doing your best doesn't mean clinging to outcomes. It means showing up fully, doing what's right, and stepping aside with calm eyes. A father once told me this after losing his company. I used to pray for success. Now I pray for accuracy. That line stayed with me for years. Because accuracy means you act from clarity, not craving. It's the difference between forcing the world to open a door and simply knocking, then trusting that what's behind it is either yours or not meant for you. Here's a small scene from my own life. Years ago, I wrote a letter to my father, not to accuse him, not to fix the past, just to speak the truth I had carried for too long. I told him how his silence shaped me, how his absence built both my strength and my walls. It wasn't angry, it wasn't poetic, it was simply real. And after I sent it, no reply came. Weeks passed, then months. Every day, I opened that mailbox like a boy still hoping to be seen. Until one evening, my mentor, Kai, found me there sitting outside the workshop, letter copy still folded in my hand. He said softly, "If your heart spoke without poison, then his silence is not rejection, it's completion." That line hit deeper than comfort. It was release. Because when your action is clean, the result can't dirty you. You expect fairness. You expect effort to equal reward, love to be returned, plans to work. And when they don't, frustration grows like a weed through your patience. But life is not a contract. It's weather. Sometimes it rains for no reason. Sometimes you give everything and still lose. That's not injustice, that's nature. I used to believe I could design a flawless life, perfect timing, perfect words, perfect relationships. But perfection is a silent prison. You never arrive because the bars keep moving. One evening I spilled coffee on a wooden sculpture I'd worked on for weeks. I cursed, ready to destroy it. But Kai, my mentor, walked over, looked at the stain, and said, "Let it dry." Maybe the flaw will make it real, and it did. The mark became the piece's heart. That's when I understood. Perfection isn't beauty. Acceptance is. The clean line is pleasing, the human line is moving. Clients, partners, lovers, they don't trust flawless, they trust honest. Trade polish for truth and watch connection deepen. Stop demanding the world to behave. Love the cracks, the delays, the mismatched days. Life doesn't owe you symmetry, it gives you texture. So when something goes wrong this week, don't ask, "Why me?" Ask, "What's life showing me that I refused to see when everything was smooth?" That's how peace enters. Not when life becomes perfect, but when you stop insisting it should be. Perfection is fear disguised as progress. Precision is peace. Are you peaceful or just agreeable? People think peace comes from saying yes to everyone, but real peace begins the moment you stop making promises your soul never approved. Every messy argument, every hidden resentment, every sleepless night, somewhere in there, there's a broken agreement. Something you said yes to when your heart was whispering no. We don't lose peace by accident. We trade it away, one unclear boundary at a time. I learned this watching people who seem effortlessly calm. They aren't less busy. They're just honest earlier. They don't overcommit. They don't people please. They live by clean contracts, spoken or silent, that protect their energy like sacred ground. Marcus Aurelius said, Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one in today's language. Stop negotiating your own standards. If you tell someone you'll be there, be there. If you can't, say so clearly, not poetically, because every soft lie you tell to keep the peace becomes a small landmine under your feet. What you don't say turns into a secret invoice. It arrives with interest. Here's the contrarian truth. Kindness without clarity is cruelty wearing perfume. Make agreements like clear glass. When the glass is cloudy, even clean water looks suspicious. Clarity doesn't add rules. It removes misunderstandings. You're not helping people by hiding your limits. You're training them to expect what empties you. At work, clean agreements look like this. I can deliver this by Friday, not tomorrow. In relationships, I care about you, but I won't discuss this when you're shouting. With yourself, I'll check my phone after I finish this task, not between thoughts. Notice how much peace those sentences buy. Epictetus wrote, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Clean agreements are exactly that. Decisions you sign with behavior, not words. You don't need to end everything. Just tell the truth about what it costs to keep pretending. There's a detail I love. People who live by clean agreements have a different kind of silence. It's not withdrawal, it's authority. They don't disappear. They simply no longer explain themselves to noise. Authority is kindness with a spine. Humor moment. I once told a friend, I'm trying to be more direct. He said, "You mean scary honest?" Maybe, but scary honesty saves more relationships than polite lies ever did. Peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the absence of confusion. Change doesn't knock, it just enters, moves your furniture, shifts your plans, and leaves you staring at a room that no longer feels like yours. Most people fight it. They cling to old versions of themselves, old stories that once made sense. But holding on to what's gone is like keeping dead flowers because you love the color. When my mother sold our old family house, I fought it. Every nail, every crack carried memories. But the day it emptied, sunlight hit the floor in a way I had never seen before. It was as if the house sighed in relief. I realized it wasn't just the home that was ready to move on. It was musty. We never really lose places. We just leave versions of ourselves behind. Change isn't here to hurt you. It's here to return you to movement. Even loss is a kind of redirection, a divine nudge saying, you've outgrown this chapter. You can resist it or you can walk with it, barefoot, uncertain, but free. As Seneca said, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. So when life shifts again, don't ask, why is this happening to me? Ask, where is it trying to take me next? Because you'll never find peace in holding still, only in learning how to move with grace. When you stop fighting for control, you start flowing with purpose. Life doesn't always block you, it redirects you. But most of us panic at the first closed door, as if the universe suddenly stopped working. We call it bad luck. We call it failure. But sometimes that failure is just life's way of saying, not this door, the next one. A few years ago, I met a man named Julian. He worked at a design firm for 15 years. Steady job, quiet life, same routine. One day his company merged and he got replaced by software that could do his work in half the time. He was furious, not just because he lost his job, but because he lost the story he told himself. If I stay loyal, life will stay loyal back. But life doesn't trade in loyalty. It trades in readiness. Julian spent months sending resumes, forcing old contacts, begging for a place that no longer fit him. Until one afternoon, he walked into a small cafe to escape the rain. He started sketching random logo ideas on napkins just to kill time. A stranger next to him watched and said, "You should charge people for that." That sentence became a spark. Within a year, Julian had his own small studio, clients, freedom, and strangely, peace. He told me later, losing that job didn't break me. It introduced me to the version of myself I was avoiding. And that's the invitation most people ignore. Every obstacle hides a doorway, but you'll never see it while staring at the wall. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." That isn't poetic fluff. It's physics for the soul. When resistance meets clarity, direction is born. Here's the shift. Stop labeling problems as punishment. Start treating them as training. Training beats blaming. Muscles grow where the weight felt unfair. Every rejection is feedback. Every delay is data. The universe is not cruel. It's precise. It doesn't take things to hurt you. It takes things to edit you. In relationships, the person who walked away wasn't your loss. They were your lesson in boundaries. At work, the project that failed wasn't your downfall. It was your filter for focus. In life, pain isn't proof of misfortune. It's a tuition you pay for wisdom. But there's a trick to making obstacles useful. You have to stop taking them personally. The obstacle isn't about you. It's about the next layer of you, the one that only appears under pressure. Try this simple exercise. Think of one setback that still irritates you. Now rewrite it as an invitation. Not, "Why did this happen to me?" but "What did this prepare me for?" If you do that honestly, the bitterness turns into blueprint. Stop asking, "Why me?" and ask, "What muscle?" Then build where it hurts. Here's the irony. Life's most painful events often carry your next alignment, but you'll only hear the invitation when you stop yelling at the door. Maybe your obstacle isn't blocking you. Maybe it's the exact weight needed to make you strong enough to hold what's next. When you're in the middle of the storm, all you see is rain. But step higher and you realize the storm is small and the horizon is still there. Perspective isn't magic. It's maturity. It's the quiet decision to see beyond the surface of pain. That's the trap. We don't see life as it is. We see it as we are. When you feel betrayed, everyone looks untrustworthy. When you feel insecure, every silence sounds like rejection. But the world isn't changing. Your lens is. Here's a simple practice. When something upsets you, ask yourself 3 questions. Will this still matter a year from now? What might I be missing from their side? What could this be teaching me right now? You'd be surprised how often pain loses its sharpness when you stop taking it personally. Perspective is freedom. It's not pretending the problem doesn't exist. It's remembering that you exist beyond the problem. Swap the lens. This is happening to me. This is happening for me to grow through me. It won't erase the storm, but it will hand you the wheel. Sometimes it's not the situation that hurts. It's our story about it. Change the story and pain becomes teacher. Keep the story and pain becomes prison. A free mind isn't one without storms. It's one that remembers the horizon. And sometimes freedom begins by questioning what you've been chasing. We spend half our lives chasing things we never chose. Not because we're greedy, but because we were programmed. From the moment you could walk, labels were placed on your wants, responsibility, potential, success. But few ever stop to ask, is this truly yours? Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Poverty isn't a wallet problem, it's a direction problem. Here's the cut. Ambition without awareness isn't progress, it's panic wearing a purpose. And that panic is what many now call success. Look around. The bigger car isn't about steel, it's about respect. The promotion isn't about a title, it's about being seen. That isn't weakness, it's confusion dressed as ambition. A question that separates the free from the frantic. Is this desire expanding me or emptying me? Right desire feels like quiet strength, not noisy hunger. Chasing the wrong desire is like walking all day in shoes a size too small. You're moving, but losing yourself with every step. The right fit is quieter, and it carries you farther. If it expands you, it will cost patience, not peace. If it empties you, it will promise validation and steal your sleep. Most people fear silence because it exposes what noise hides. They fill every pause with chatter, every gap with music, every moment alone with a screen. Anything to escape the sound of themselves. But silence isn't empty. It's the room where truth finally speaks. In a noisy cafe, a barista moves fast but speaks little. He says the coffee tastes better when his mind is quiet. The more he listens to the rhythm of the steam, the smoother every cup becomes. Silence to him isn't absence, it's focus. Warren Buffett once said, "You can't hear opportunity if you never stop talking." He spends 80% of his day in silence, reading, thinking, waiting. That's why when he finally speaks, the market listens. Silence for him isn't absence. It's compound interest for the mind. That's when I understood noise is comfort, silence is clarity. In silence, you see what still hurts. In silence, you meet your fears without disguise. And in silence, you start hearing the difference between what's urgent and what's important. You don't need a forest or a temple for that. You just need 5 minutes where you don't reach for your phone, your playlist, or anyone's opinion. Sit with your own heartbeat, your own company. Try a 30-second sound map. Count 5 different sounds, then return to silence. Notice how your mind obeys when you give it a simple job. At first, it feels awkward. Then it feels honest. Then it feels like home. Because silence doesn't punish you. It introduces you by oshes to the self you keep postponing. Silence is not the absence of words. It's the presence of wisdom. Every calm pause you take rewires your nervous system to trust life again. Silence is imagination's breathing room, where ideas mature without demand. Most people use imagination to escape. The wise use it to build. We romanticize daydreaming as if it's some soft luxury of the heart. But the truth is, imagination can either sharpen you or drown you, depending on what you do with it after the picture fades. I once watched a woman at a small cafe downtown. She sat alone, same corner every morning, a notebook always open. No laptop, no phone, just a pen and coffee that was always half finished. At first, I thought she was a writer. One day I asked, "Do you journal?" She smiled and said, "No. I write the life I'm training myself to believe in." That line never left me. Every morning she wrote small scenes. The garden she wanted to tend, the calm voice she wanted in arguments, the patience she hoped to show her teenage son. Not as fantasy, but as rehearsal. She wasn't escaping the world. She was designing her mind. That's what the Stoics meant when they spoke of premeditatio malorum. Imagining potential hardships not to fear them, but to prepare the soul for them. Imagination, when used consciously, isn't denial, it's discipline. Most people misuse imagination as anxiety in disguise. They don't visualize beauty, they rehearse disaster. They don't see what could go right. They storyboard everything that might go wrong. They call it being realistic. But what they're really doing is praying to fear 5 times a day. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Remember, your imagination obeys the emotions you feed it most. The goal isn't to stop imagining, It's to train imagination to work for you, not against you. 1-minute storyboard. Frame 1, the trigger. Frame 2, your calm action. Frame 3, the aftermath you can own. That's imagination translated into motion. History lens. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy didn't wish for the moon. He declared a clear target: land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the decade ends. That wasn't magic. It was a vision strapped to checklists, budgets, training, simulations, failures studied line by line. 8 years later, Apollo 11 touched lunar dust. That's manifestation done right. Imagine precisely, then rehearse relentlessly until reality has nowhere else to go. But yes, the woman at the cafe still sits there some mornings. Her notebook is worn, coffee stains on every corner. But her posture has changed. Less waiting, more knowing. She's not manifesting. She's rehearsing peace until it becomes muscle memory. Repetition doesn't beg reality to change. It teaches you to carry it better. So maybe imagination isn't where you run when life feels heavy. Maybe it's the quiet room where you rebuild your strength. We keep chasing luxury, forgetting peace was always free. You don't need more things. You need fewer reasons to run from yourself. We live in a world where people buy bigger houses just to feel smaller inside them, where dinner is posted before it's tasted, and success is a number that resets every time someone else wins. But simplicity is rebellion. My neighbor is an old man who still bakes his own bread every morning. He eats alone, watching the sunlight slide across his small kitchen table. I don't chase big happiness, he once told me. I just make small peace every day. You don't simplify life by selling everything. You simplify by wanting less and feeling more. A walk at sunset, a laugh that isn't rehearsed, a hand you don't have to earn. I once thought more was the reward for working hard. Now I know enough is the reward for waking up grateful. So try this. Before you buy the next thing, ask yourself, do I need this or do I need peace? You'll be surprised how often it's the second one. Because living simply isn't about owning less. It's about realizing how little you need to feel whole. Joy begins where urgency ends. Later, most people treat joy like a paycheck, something you earn after life approves of you. But peace doesn't work like that. It doesn't wait for the weekend, the promotion, or the apology. It starts when you stop postponing permission to feel alive. We say things like, I'll be happy when I move out. I'll relax when this project ends. I'll travel when I have time. But when is the most dangerous word in the language of peace, because it quietly teaches you that joy is somewhere else, and you are always late to it. One morning before dawn, I saddled my horse, his name's Happy, and rode out into the cold. The sky was pale silver, the air biting. Halfway up the valley, the bridge had washed out. For a moment, I felt that old frustration rise. But Happy just waited, calm, warm air curling at his nostrils. So we turned, found another path through the mist. No anger, no rush, just rhythm, hoofbeats, sunrise. And right there, I realized joy isn't at the finish line. He was under me all along, steady and breathing, named Happy. Seneca said, true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future. It doesn't mean giving up ambition. It means stopping the obsession with outcomes before they steal your mornings. Here's what I learned. Joy is not a luxury. It's a discipline. Joy isn't loud. It's the steady hum of a life that fits. It takes training to notice the good without rushing to the next goal. It takes strength to smile without reason, to rest without guilt, to let a day be enough. Think about the last time you laughed. Not because something happened, but because you were there to witness life happen. The sound of someone humming in the street, the taste of coffee when you finally slowed down enough to notice it, the way sunlight moves across a room like it's choosing who to touch next. That's joy. Not loud, not rare, just unclaimed. Claim one small thing today. The clink of a mug, the rustle of a page, the way morning light makes ordinary wood look golden. I used to think joy was a reward for fixing myself. Turns out fixing myself was just remembering joy was never broken. If you want something practical, each morning before you touch your phone, find one reason to be grateful that has nothing to do with achievement. Maybe it's the roof, maybe it's the silence, maybe it's that you survived your own storms. Write it down if you can. Gratitude is how joy keeps its shape. And if today feels heavy, remember this. You don't need everything to make sense to feel peace. You just need one honest moment of presence. Because in the end, joy isn't a destination. It's the sound your soul makes when it stops rushing. You don't have to like what happened to you. You just have to stop fighting it. The Stoics called it amor fati, the love of one's fate. It sounds poetic, but it's really practical. It means stop waiting for a different past. There was a time I cursed every wrong turn, the betrayal, the bankruptcy, the sleepless years. I thought I'd been punished. But looking back, I see how every wound pushed me closer to who I was meant to become. If I hadn't lost everything, I would have never met Kai in that quiet workshop. If Mara hadn't left, I might never have learned the difference between love and attachment. Even pain, in hindsight, was mercy wearing a darker color. Loving your fate doesn't mean pretending everything's beautiful. It means trusting that even the ugly parts belong in your masterpiece. Next time something goes wrong, don't whisper, "Why me?" Say, "Teach me." Because fate isn't your enemy, it's your instructor. Seneca wrote, "The willing soul is led by fate, the unwilling is dragged." I used to be dragged, bruised, bitter, resisting. Now I walk, slowly, sometimes still afraid, but walking. When you stop running from what life gives you, you start receiving what life's been trying to give all along. We keep living like life is a rehearsal, as if the real scene starts later, when we finally figure it all out. But the curtain never waits. Every breath is already the main act. Death isn't cruel, it's honest. It's the teacher that reminds you every argument, every delay, every grudge is a luxury you can't afford forever. When you truly remember that your time is finite, you stop negotiating with your heart. You say the apology, you take the trip, you write the message you've been postponing for years. Memento mori, remember you must die, not to fear it, but to feel the fire of being here, right now. So look around you, look at your hands. Everything you love passes through them. Open them, let control go, let gratitude stay. This coffee, this sunrise, this ordinary day, this is your eternity in disguise. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. This is it, and it's slipping by beautifully. When you stop chasing meaning, meaning starts chasing you. That's when acceptance turns magnetic. So here's what I know now. You don't chase peace, you build space for it. You don't beg for love. You become someone who protects it. You don't hunt success. You prepare for its weight. Everything meant for you is not running away. It's orbiting closer each time you stop demanding and start deserving. You see, life isn't a racetrack, it's a mirror. The calmer you move, the clearer it reflects. The moment you stop proving, you start attracting. That's what all of this was about. not control, not magic. Alignment, the quiet power of doing your best, then letting it land. And if you forget everything else from this video, remember this: what belongs to you will not require chasing. It will recognize you when you've become still enough to recognize yourself. You've walked through storms and found your calm. You've learned that control isn't power. Clarity is. That acceptance doesn't mean surrender, it means precision. And somewhere between losing and letting go, you discovered peace that no one can take. But there's another layer. Peace is not just something you find, it's something you practice. It's the discipline of silence in a world addicted to noise, the quiet power that builds empires inside before the world ever sees them. So as we step into the next act, leave the idea of control behind. You no longer need to force the world to listen, because true mastery doesn't shout, it doesn't beg, it moves, silently, deliberately, unshaken. This is where the noise ends and your quiet power begins. Stop waiting for someone to rescue you. Nobody is coming, not your family, not your closest friends, not even the person who once swore to love you forever. That silence may feel like abandonment, but it is not a coffin. It is a forge. When the noise of concern dies, you are left alone with the raw material of your life. And in that furnace of solitude, something harder than comfort is born: clarity. Imagine standing at a strange auction where the only item up for bid is your own soul. Around you, people are distracted, raising their paddles for trivial things: status, gossip, fleeting attention. No one bids for you. The hammer falls, and suddenly you realize, if your life is going to be claimed, it must be by your own hand. That realization is not cruelty, it is freedom. This journey will carry us through 9 movements, each one a room where another illusion dies and a deeper strength appears. By the time we cross the middle point, I'll hand you something rare, a hidden key, a practice so simple and unusual that it can shift the way you carry yourself the very same day. Most speakers won't share it because it is too personal, too direct, but you will hear it here. The title promised that when you accept no one cares, everything changes. That promise begins now. So let me ask, if every cheer vanished tonight, if every witness turned their eyes away, would you still dare to claim your own life? Take a deep breath, steady yourself, and let's step inside. If no one claps, do you still move? Steve Jobs once said, "Getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me." In 1985, he was forced out of the very company he had built, humiliated in front of the world. Yet in that silence, stripped of applause, he found clarity and returned years later with ideas that reshaped technology forever. Think of that small, awful second when the email arrives, silence louder than any insult. That story hides a truth most of us resist. Nobody is obligated to notice your pain. Nobody is staying awake at night planning how to lift you. From childhood, we've been taught the opposite. Parents said, "Tell us if it hurts." Teachers promised, "Raise your hand and help will come." Lovers swore, "I'll always understand." And so we grew up expecting our suffering to be visible, as if agony carried its own alarm bell. But here's the hard fact. Most alarms only ring inside your own chest. Picture this. A man sits at a family dinner, his fork idle, his voice fading. He waits for someone to sense the weight he carries. Around him, knives scrape, laughter bounces off the walls, small talk fills the air. Nobody notices, not because they despise him, but because they are drowning in their own currents. Silence is not a universal language. It is only heard by those who choose to listen. That realization hurts at first, but it can also be your release. Being unseen doesn't mean you lack worth, it means others are preoccupied. Too many surrender the wheel thinking, if they don't come, I can't move. But the car stalls only because the driver left the seat. Nietzsche once reminded us, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. In simple terms, if you build your identity on being noticed, you will spend your whole life feeling invisible. Picture no replies, no calls. The world keeps spinning. Do you vanish with the silence or begin? This is your first reclamation. Stop waiting for others to validate your storm. The wheel was always in your hands. No rescue, just responsibility. That's not loneliness. That's agency. That's the end of performance and the beginning of becoming. From this moment on, your silence is not emptiness. It's command. And command begins where performance ends. Here's the reversal. Pain sold for attention never heals. The strange truth is this: the more we perform our pain to be noticed, the less healing it brings. Suffering can be real, but once it becomes a show, its power to transform disappears. Think of that friend who always begins a conversation with a sigh. At first, people listen, nod, offer sympathy, but over time, the circle around them grows thinner. Not because others are heartless, but because constant rehearsed misery empties the room of air. What once felt authentic slowly becomes static in the background, and the world encourages it. Post a dramatic rant online, and likes arrive like candy. Share heartbreak in detail, and comments pile up. But does it mend the wound, or keep it raw so strangers can briefly applaud? It's like flashing an unbandaged cut. Skin never hardens, scars never form, and the wound becomes currency for fading attention. I've done it too. One time I exaggerated how exhausting my week had been, hoping someone would marvel at my endurance. Instead, a colleague looked at me and said flatly, "We're all tired." Brutal? Yes, but it freed me. Sometimes one honest sentence shakes you awake more than 100 sympathetic nods. Cleanthes, one of the early Stoics, once warned, "Do not show your sore finger to the crowd." He didn't mean suppress your struggles. He meant protect them. Not everything sacred should be paraded for pity. Healing often prefers silence, the kind that allows dignity to breathe. Dignity grows in quiet the way roots grow underground, hidden but holding the whole tree steady. So pause for a moment. Imagine holding one struggle like a secret gem in your pocket. Not hidden from shame, but kept safe because it belongs to you. Feel how different that is from placing it on display for shallow applause. Your worth was never meant to be measured by how visibly broken you appear. Keep some battles private and let your actions, not your wounds, speak. Keep your wounds private long enough for them to become wisdom, not performance. What if your best defense is no defense? There is a strange freedom in not rushing to defend yourself. Picture this. You're at a family gathering, and someone makes a comment that slices a little too deep about your choices, your parenting, your career. Instinct says to launch into defense, to prove your worth on the spot. But what if you didn't? What if you let the words hang in the air and refused to duel with them? Most panic at silence, thinking respect comes from quick defense. But the more you explain, the weaker you sound. The less you justify, the stronger you stand. It's the same in love. A partner says, "Why didn't you text me back right away?" The temptation is to pile on reasons, traffic, meetings, dead battery, but here's the reversal. A simple, calm look and, "Because I was present where I was," carries far more weight than a tangled list of excuses. It's like a mountain facing the wind. The mountain doesn't explain why it stands where it stands. The wind circles, then moves on. I once stood silent when a colleague mocked my idea in front of others. He smirked and said, "That's ridiculous. Who would ever take that seriously?" The room broke into laughter. The old me would have scrambled, defending every angle, my voice climbing higher to prove I was right. Instead, I let the silence stretch. I looked at him, calm, unflinching. The laughter grew thin, then awkward. Someone shifted in their chair. By the next day, the same idea, unchanged, was taken seriously, not because I fought for it, but because I didn't. Sometimes silence is sharper than any defense. It forces others to measure the weight of their own words. Epictetus whispered it centuries ago. Don't argue what a good man should be. Be one in plain words. Stop wasting breath convincing the crowd. Live it. Let time reveal what words cannot. The highest form of freedom isn't saying everything, it's not needing to. Alone is not empty, it's training. Solitude has always been painted as punishment. We imagine the empty chair, the phone that doesn't ring, the calendar with blank squares. But here's the reversal. What looks like emptiness on the outside often becomes power on the inside. Think of a Saturday where plans fall through. At first, you scroll endlessly, restless for distraction. Then something unexpected happens. You begin to hear your own thoughts, not as background noise, but as guidance. That stillness is uncomfortable at first, but it sharpens you. It's the training ground of resilience. In relationships, the fear of being alone keeps many tied to what no longer nourishes them. People stay in circles that drain them because silence feels unbearable. Yet ask yourself, what if that silence isn't exile but recalibration? What if those quiet hours are not absence but alignment? I remember walking through a crowded market abroad with Elena, my partner. Voices surrounded us in a language we couldn't understand. For a moment, I felt invisible. She leaned close and said, "Strange, isn't it? No one here knows us. Maybe that's freedom." Her words shifted everything. Suddenly, the roasted coffee, the shuffle of footsteps, the cascade of bright fabrics, all of it lit up. Solitude turned from ache to awareness in a single breath. Seneca once wrote, "The greatest empire is to rule oneself." That empire isn't built on applause, but on quiet days when no one watches. Each steady moment in solitude lays another stone. And the same law holds in the field. Real strength is forged alone. Most people fear being alone. They see it as emptiness, as rejection, as proof that something is missing. That's why so many fill every silence with chatter, every weekend with noise, every night with a glowing screen. But here's the contrarian truth. Solitude is not weakness. It is a forge. And the person who learns to stand alone becomes unshakable when the world shakes. Think about it. The strongest oak does not grow in a crowded garden where other trees shield it. It grows on the hilltop, battered by wind, shaped by storms. Alone, it learns to dig its roots deeper. So do we. Solitude is the wind that hardens us, the space that deepens us. History and philosophy remind us of this again and again. Thoreau once wrote, "I never found a companion that was so companionable as solitude." Alone time is not loneliness. It is the closest friend we often neglect. It is the harbor where we steady our hands before we sail again into the world. And think of great creators, Einstein walking alone with his violin, or Darwin spending years in quiet study. They weren't hiding from the world, they were drawing strength from solitude to reshape it. Yet today, solitude is misunderstood. Stay home too often and people whisper, "He must be lonely." Choose not to chase every social invitation and they ask, Is something wrong? But the truth is, solitude is not the absence of connection. It's the presence of self. Without it, every relationship becomes need, not choice. Every opinion becomes noise, not conviction. Picture this. After a long family quarrel, instead of adding more words, you step outside for a quiet walk. The street lights flicker, the night air cools your breath, and slowly the anger untangles. Or at work, you close the office door for 10 minutes, no emails, no voices, just pen and paper. In that pause, ideas you couldn't see in the chaos suddenly appear. Alone, you see clearer. The danger isn't solitude, it's never facing yourself. Because the man or woman who cannot bear their own company will always be a prisoner to others. And the one who can sit in stillness, they become sharper, their mind clearer, like the surface of a still lake reflecting truth without distortion. Their senses grow more alert, and yes, they even carry youth longer, because a calm spirit does not age as quickly as a restless one. A still mind is not empty, it is ready. To master peace, you must first master being with yourself. Few things cut deeper than unfair criticism. It strikes without warning, sometimes from people you trust, sometimes from strangers who barely know you. At work, it may sound like a manager dismissing months of effort with one careless line, "This isn't good enough." At home, it could be your partner saying in anger, "You never listen to me." Among friends, it might be a careless remark, "You always think you're better than us." Words like these sink into the chest, not because they are true, but because they feel unjust. And here is where most of us fall into the trap. We rush to fight back. We defend ourselves with louder words, hoping to erase the sting. That's not true. You don't understand. I worked harder than anyone. But here's the paradox. The louder we argue, the smaller we appear. The more we explain, the more guilty we seem. The Stoics saw this clearly. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your judgment of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." In other words, the insult itself carries no blade. It's your mind that sharpens it. Now picture another way. Imagine in that moment, at work, in family, in love, you don't rush to speak. You pause. You breathe. You let the words hang in the air like smoke. Without your reaction, they lose weight. Without your defense, they cannot dig into you. Silence here is not surrender. It is strategy. It is proof that your dignity doesn't depend on someone else's opinion. Think of the Bible. When Jesus stood before his accusers, they hurled insults, false charges, and hatred at him. Yet he often answered with silence. He didn't try to argue his way out, didn't waste words on those blinded by rage. That silence carried more weight than any defense. It revealed the emptiness of their accusations. That is the quiet power of restraint. The truth is, silence reveals more about the critic than about you. Their anger, their insecurity, their impatience, all expose the moment you refuse to add fuel. While they waste energy, you conserve it. While they wound themselves, you remain whole. Because sometimes the strongest voice is the one that chooses not to speak. The 5-second rule: inhale, hold, see, nod, stay silent. Marcus Aurelius warned, how much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it. The insult lasts a moment, but the fallout of our reaction can last a lifetime. I remember a man who once came to me for guidance, a business owner in his mid-40s. He told me how one furious outburst nearly destroyed his company. An important client criticized him unfairly in front of others, and he snapped back with sarcasm. For a few seconds, he felt powerful, but within weeks, the client pulled out, employees lost trust, and his reputation sank. He admitted, "It wasn't their words that cost me everything. It was my reaction." Now imagine a different picture. You're provoked, words boiling on your tongue. Instead of shouting, you pause. You let silence do what fire cannot. That pause is not weakness, it's mastery. Just as a driver controls a car by holding the brakes, not the horn, you control yourself by holding your response. Here's the paradox. People think expressing anger shows strength, but often it only reveals how easily we can be controlled. The world pushes one button and we explode on command. Think of a husband who blurts out, "I regret marrying you," in fury. The moment passes, but the echo never fully dies. Even in literature, this truth shines. In Homer's Iliad, the greatest warrior had one fatal weakness, his Achilles' heel. And it wasn't his body, but his rage. The strongest people in real life do the opposite. They choose calm over conquest. Their silence in anger becomes their power. So what's the practice? Next time anger surges, step away for 20 seconds. Count your breath to this. If I release this anger, will it solve or will it scar? That pause is your shield. Control ends where anger begins. Take back the boundary, because anger itself is not the enemy, your lack of control is. The one who controls his anger controls his fate. When fury rises, look at your hands and count to 20. Let silence do what fire cannot. A close friend once told me he dreamed of opening his own shop. He was excited, fearful of plans, already picturing the shelves, the customers, even the smell of fresh paint on the walls. But instead of letting the idea grow in silence, he rushed to share it with a distant relative. The response? "Don't be stupid. Shops always fail. You'll lose everything." That single conversation drained him. Days later, the plan was gone. Not because it was impossible, but because he gave away his fragile seed of purpose too soon, and someone's fear stepped on it before it could take root. This is what happens when we reveal too much too early. Purpose is like a newborn flame. In the beginning, it needs protection, silence, and air of its own. If you expose it to the wind of other people's doubts, it flickers out before it ever lights the room. A seed doesn't need applause. It needs shade. Protect it until it grows roots. I've seen it again and again. People with brilliant ideas, but they trade them for approval too quickly. They speak before they act. They seek validation instead of vision. And every time the noise of others drowns out the voice within. Silence then is not emptiness. It is a shield. It's the space where you let your dream gather strength before exposing it to the world. Seneca once said, "If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable." And I would add, if you speak before you're ready, even the best wind won't carry you. Think of your own life. How many times have you said yes when you meant no? How often have you let the expectations of family, colleagues, or society steer your choices? Silence, deliberate, chosen silence, is where you step back and ask, is this truly my path or just their noise? Look at the greatest builders of history, innovators, artists, leaders. They all had moments of retreat, moments where they shut out the world to listen only to the compass inside. Purpose isn't found in applause, it's forged in silence. And what grows in silence must be guarded from spectacle. Not everything sacred belongs on stage. Not every truth is meant to be displayed. In a world addicted to sharing, we've been trained to believe that silence equals weakness. That if you don't post it, it didn't happen. That if you don't narrate your wound, you haven't healed it. But here's the reversal. The most powerful parts of you are often the ones you keep untold. Think of social media. Someone posts a long rant about betrayal. Comments flood in, hearts, hugs, stay strong. For a moment they feel connected, but when the scroll moves on, the ache remains, often heavier than before. Why? Because performance gave temporary comfort, but robbed the pain of its sacred privacy. I once sat at a dinner where a man kept circling back to the same heartbreak. The first time he told it, people leaned in. "That's awful. You deserve better." But as he repeated it again and again, the room grew restless. By the fifth return, someone whispered, "He's still on this." His pain hadn't healed, it had turned into theater. And theater, no matter how tragic, always loses its audience. Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." But proving yourself doesn't require an audience. Some victories belong to silence, their strength seen only in the way you walk after. On the softer side, sometimes keeping a story close feels like keeping a small flame cupped in your hands. Not everything needs to burn bright for the crowd. Some fires are meant to warm only you. Guard the ember, not out of secrecy, but out of wisdom. The more mystery you protect, the more magnetic your presence becomes, because people sense that there's something real they can't consume. Take a moment to think, which part of your life have you been too quick to display, and what would shift if you guarded it instead? Held it close, let it grow roots in private, sacred soil. Your peace doesn't need public validation. Guard what is rare. Let the mystery of your silence be its own kind of power. Every seed needs shadow before it can face the light. Rumors are like smoke. They twist, they spread, and if you chase them, you only end up choking yourself. I've lived this in my own family. When I chose a different path than what was expected, whispers began. Some said I was irresponsible, others that I was ungrateful. The urge to defend myself was overwhelming. I wanted to argue at every dinner table, correct every lie. But a mentor once told me, if you spend all your time swatting at smoke, you'll forget to build a fire that shows the truth. So I stayed silent. I kept working. And slowly the rumors faded because they had nothing left to feed on. The people who mattered saw the results, not the noise. That silence became my shield. It felt like walking through a storm without opening an umbrella. Yes, I got wet, but I kept walking and the clouds broke on their own. The Stoics echoed this wisdom. Epictetus said, "If anyone speak badly of you, do not defend yourself against his words, but reply, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned only the seas.'" It sounds sharp, but it points to a deeper truth. Rumors say more about those who spread them than about the one they target. Think of a friend who spends their life chasing gossip. Every word spoken against them, they fight back. Do they look strong or do they look desperate? Contrast that with the man or woman who continues their work, their path, their purpose, letting actions speak louder. Silence here is not surrender. It is a declaration. I will not live at the mercy of other people's tongues. Rumors are stray dogs, fed by attention, starved by silence. Ignorance has a sound. It's loud, certain, and often wrong. And you see it even in children. A little boy once told me with great seriousness that the moon must follow him home every night because it was always above his head. He wasn't trying to deceive, he simply didn't know better. We smile at that kind of innocence. Yet when adults cling to their own illusions with the same certainty, we no longer laugh, we argue. We forgive the child's certainty. We must outgrow the adults. But here's the twist. The more you argue with ignorance, the more it multiplies. It's like shouting at an echo. It only comes back louder. I remember a neighbor once lecturing me about my own craft, insisting he knew more though he had never lived a day in it. Every part of me wanted to fight, to correct, to prove, but I chose silence. I let his words hang in the air with no resistance. Hours later, another friend in the room pulled me aside and said, "You didn't have to say a thing." He showed himself that is the power of restraint. When ignorance talks, silence doesn't mean weakness. It means you refuse to waste your energy proving what time will reveal. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength to answer ignorance with silence is to step out of its storm and keep your own clarity intact." Think of it like water. When the river is muddy, no amount of stirring makes it clear, but leave it untouched, and in time it settles, revealing the bottom. Your silence is that stillness. It lets the mud sink on its own. So ask yourself, the next time someone insists on a falsehood with all the volume of truth, will you spend your breath trying to outshout them? Or will you let silence expose what noise never can? Don't fan the smoke. Open the window. Let time settle the mud. Injustice feels like fire. It burns before it touches you. A rude boss taking credit for your work. A family member twisting the truth to make you the villain. A system that seems blind to fairness. Everything in you wants to shout, to demand, to fight. But here's the hard lesson. Rage against injustice often gives it more power, because when your enemy controls your reaction, they control you. I remember a friend who once lost a promotion he deserved. The decision was unfair, the politics obvious. He stormed into the manager's office, demanded an explanation, raised his voice. "This was mine. You know it," he shouted. The manager leaned back, expression cold, and replied, "Calm down. This outburst only proves why you weren't chosen." By the end, nothing changed, except his reputation, which never recovered. His anger gave the injustice longer life. Now contrast that with another story. A woman I once knew was wrongly accused by her relatives of taking money that wasn't hers. Everyone expected her to shout, to fight, to defend herself at every gathering. But she stayed calm, said nothing, and kept living with honesty. Months later, the truth came out. The money had never gone missing at all. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was dignity. And in the end, the same relatives who doubted her felt shame, not triumph. The Stoics spoke of this again and again. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." What a paradox. When the world tries to pull you into its ugliness, your silence becomes a refusal to mirror it. But silence here does not mean passivity. It means stepping back, breathing, choosing the right moment and the right words. Sometimes it means letting actions, not arguments, prove your strength. Think of injustice as a thief. If you shout and chase wildly, you exhaust yourself while they slip away. But if you stay calm, watchful, and patient, you learn their pattern, and one day you stop them for good. A jeweler doesn't chase a thief into every alley. He fortifies the vault and changes the locks. That's justice with discipline. So the next time injustice confronts you, remember, the choice is not between silence and justice. It is between reaction and mastery. And the quiet choice may be the one that turns the fire into light. Insults are like hooks. If you bite, you're caught. If you stay still, they fall harmlessly to the ground. I remember once walking with a friend when a stranger shouted something crude from across the street. My friend spun around, ready to argue, ready to defend his honor. But what honor is there in wrestling with mud? I kept walking. He asked me later, "Why didn't you say anything?" And I answered, because not every voice deserves my breath. The Stoics taught this clearly. Epictetus wrote, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit. The insult itself isn't what hurts, it's our choice to swallow the poison. Refuse to drink, and the poison loses all its power. Think about it. When someone hurls words meant to cut you down, they are really revealing themselves, not you. Their anger, their jealousy, their emptiness. To answer is to validate it. To stay silent is to expose it. Think of ancient warfare. Generals often sent soldiers to hurl insults at the enemy camp, hoping the opposing commander would lose control and charge too early. Entire battles were won not by swords, but by words. The foolish general who took the bait doomed his men. The wise one who stayed calm let the insults die in the wind and struck when the time was right. Even Alexander the Great was once taunted by his enemies. But instead of charging blindly, he held his ground, waited, and then struck with precision. His restraint won battles that strength alone never could. Here's a twist. Insults can be gifts in disguise. They train you to master your reactions, to prove to yourself that no one owns your peace but you. Strength wins fights, restraint wins empires. So the next time an insult comes, ask yourself, will you let their words chain you, or will you let silence guard you? Because the strongest reply to an insult is not sharper words. It is the man or woman who keeps walking, untouched. Dignity isn't decoration, it's strategy. A closed door can be a compass. Rejection is one of the sharpest knives we face. A partner says, I just don't feel the same anymore. An employer says, we've chosen someone else. A friend drifts away without explanation. In those moments, it feels like the world is closing its doors one by one. But here's the strange reversal. Rejection often saves us from the very places where our strength doesn't belong. Think about it. How many times have you looked back and whispered, thank God that didn't work out? At first, it felt like devastation. Later, it revealed itself as direction. The invitation was never meant to flatter you. It was meant to guide you toward a path that fits. Albert Einstein once sent his early papers to leading professors of his time. Many dismissed him, some didn't even reply. One examiner called his ideas too radical and advised him to stick with clerical work. Imagine the sting, believing with every bone in your body only to be waved off as irrelevant. Yet years later, those very ideas reshaped physics and altered humanity's view of the universe. Their rejection wasn't the end. It carved out the space for him to redefine science itself. Rejection isn't your grave. It's the doorway you were always meant to walk through. And when one door shuts, it doesn't silence your story. It clears the noise so you can hear where your true path begins. When rejection rearranges the map, you'll find routes you'd never chosen otherwise. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. When someone closes a door, don't mistake it as exile. It is scaffolding, forcing you to build elsewhere, stronger and higher than before. Pause here, recall one rejection that still stings. Instead of asking, why me? Try, what did this push me away from? What new ground did it reveal? I kept refreshing my pride for updates. None came. This is not about pretending rejection is pleasant. It cuts. But wounds can also point. And when you stop begging for the door to reopen, you begin to see the countless doors that never required permission in the first place. Closed doors don't block your path. They redraw the map. When applause becomes oxygen, truth suffocates. Applause feels sweet, doesn't it? The nod of approval from your boss, the "you're amazing" text from a partner, the likes piling up on a post. But here's the trap. The moment applause becomes fuel, silence feels like death. You start performing not for truth, but for claps. Think of the performer who bows a little too long, waiting for the audience to rise again, or the friend who tells a good story, then repeats it louder just to hear the laugh once more. The moment we crave applause, we hand over our freedom. I once saw an old pop star try to relive his glory days on stage. He sang the same songs that once filled arenas, but this time the crowd only clapped politely. Instead of letting the music speak, he pushed harder, repeating choruses, begging the audience to cheer louder. The harder he pushed, the more awkward it grew. They weren't moved, just watching a man chase echoes of a past gone. He clutched the mic like a lifeline. Ask yourself, what applause are you still signing your life away for? The Stoics warned of this centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." The irony is sharp. Why let strangers decide if your truth is enough? Here's the gentler angle. I once caught myself checking how many people noticed a story I posted. The number was smaller than I hoped. For a second, I felt hollow. Then I laughed, because I realized 100 invisible moments in my day carried more joy than that little counter ever could. Applause is fleeting. Today they clap, tomorrow they scroll. If your worth depends on their noise, you'll always be begging for an encore. Let applause be a bonus, not your air supply. When the noise fades, the self that remains must be real. Some skins must fall off for you to breathe. There comes a time when the version of you that once survived, people-pleasing, chasing recognition, explaining every move, simply stops working. It feels like wearing clothes 2 sizes too small. You can still squeeze in, but every breath hurts. At first, you fight to keep the old skin alive, but slowly you realize it's rotting, and clinging to it is what's killing you. Think of it like a house you've outgrown. You keep patching the walls, repainting the rooms, hoping comfort will return. But deep down, you know that it's no longer home. The truth is brutal, but freeing. You cannot keep living inside yesterday's identity. To become who you're meant to be, the old self must die. It stings, yes, but what replaces it breathes easier. That death isn't destruction. It's the soil where your truer self finally takes root. History shows it too. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." The Stoics knew rebirth doesn't arrive with applause. It comes with silence, misunderstanding, even loss. People will call you colder, less available, more distant. In reality, you've simply stopped trading your peace for their comfort. Here's the strange part. When you no longer beg to be understood, you become undeniable. Your absence speaks as loudly as your presence. Your stillness carries more weight than noise ever could. You stop chasing doors to open because you've realized you are the door. This is the quiet revolution. Not louder, not softer, but truer. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't beg for a witness. It simply becomes. Shed the costume. Keep the core. So let me leave you with this. If today feels heavy, maybe it's not failure. Maybe it's the first breath of a new self. The only question is, will you keep patching the old house, or will you finally step into the life that's been waiting for you? At some point in life, the noise will run out. The claps will quiet. The criticisms will lose their sting. Even the misunderstandings that once cut so deeply will dissolve into silence. And in that silence, only one figure will remain: you, standing with yourself, facing yourself, carrying yourself. That is where real power is born. Not in being noticed, not in being approved, but in learning how to breathe when no one else is watching. The world may never fully recognize your worth, and that's fine. Because worth is not a mirror they hand to you. It's a fire you keep alive inside, even when no one else feels its warmth. Think of all the times you begged life to see you through work, through family, through love. The truth is, those moments weren't wasted. They were training. Every overlooked effort, every unanswered call, every lonely night, none were endings. They were initiations, a slow preparation for the day you would finally stop chasing validation and start standing in your own light. So walk forward lighter now. Release the need to explain, to prove, to earn. Stop waiting for doors to open, and remember, you are the door. You are the passage you've been searching for. If today feels heavy, let that heaviness be a sign, because endings always weigh more than beginnings. The old self drags, resists, protests. But once it falls away, what's left is clarity, clean, undeniable, unshakable. And in that clarity, you will find a new kind of freedom. The Stoics knew it well. Strength is not in the applause, but in the discipline of showing up again and again, even when no one is clapping. Self-respect is not a gift handed by others. It's a promise you keep with yourself. So as you leave this video, carry this truth. You don't need to be seen to be real. You don't need to be understood to be whole. You don't need to be chosen to choose yourself. You've mastered discipline. You've accepted the storms. You've learned the silence that holds power. But power means nothing if it never becomes peace. This is the final act, not of control, but of becoming. When you stop chasing life, life begins to walk toward you. Welcome to the threshold. What if I told you the ground beneath your life is already shifting, and most people never notice until it cracks wide open? That's the call out. And here's the truth. Change never arrives wearing a name tag. It doesn't send you an email or book a meeting. It shows up disguised as restlessness, as disappearing friends, as chaos that doesn't make sense until later. It's like standing in a house where the walls look solid, but the foundation has already started to tilt. You don't see the movement. You feel it in your bones. In this video, we'll walk through 8 clear signals that your life is preparing to transform. Each signal is a lens, and together they form the compass you didn't know you had. And if you stay with me, by the time we reach the later part of this journey, I'll give you something rare, a practice, a gift you can carry out of this video like a secret map, one that most men never receive. So let me ask you, before we begin, if life is already speaking to you through whispers and cracks, are you willing to listen closely and test which of these signs belongs to you today? You've mastered discipline. You've accepted the storms. You've learned the silence that holds power. But power means nothing if it never becomes peace. This is the final act, not of control, but of becoming. When you stop chasing life, life begins to walk toward you. Welcome to the threshold. Change doesn't start loud. It starts with a whisper, the kind that only restless souls can hear. You wake up, the calendar is full, the paycheck is steady, and yet something inside you whispers, this isn't it. That whisper is not boredom. That whisper is the crack in the dam warning you before the flood arrives. Most people call it midlife crisis. I call it a compass. Because restlessness isn't the enemy. It's the indicator that your current skin is too tight for the man you have become. Think of a snake before it sheds. The scales itch, not because the snake is sick, but because growth has already started. I remember sitting in a glossy conference room, tie pulled tight, nodding at slides I didn't believe in. Everyone else was smiling. I felt like an imposter in my own body. That unease didn't ruin my career. It rescued me from staying asleep in it. The world tells you restlessness means you're ungrateful. In reality, it's proof that your destiny has already outgrown your surroundings. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Restlessness is your mind refusing to settle for a life that no longer fits. Restlessness isn't a flaw. It's the whisper of your future self, asking if you're finally ready to move. When your life is about to change, people start disappearing. Not quietly, not neatly. Sometimes they fade. Sometimes they cut sharp. Sometimes they betray. At first, it feels like punishment, but it's not. It's pruning. I once watched a colleague I trusted suddenly grow distant when I started speaking more directly in meetings. At home, an old friend stopped returning calls the moment I stopped drinking with him every Friday. For a while, I asked myself, what did I do wrong? The harder truth was this: nothing. I was simply no longer the man they were comfortable standing beside. It's like climbing a mountain. Some companions can only breathe at lower altitudes. As you rise, they gasp, they resist, and eventually, they let go. If you force them to stay, you'll carry dead weight, and that weight will drag you down. Most men panic when this happens. They chase, they beg, they cling to relationships that are already gone. But losing people is not failure. It's the universe filtering your circle, keeping only those strong enough to walk the next mile with you. You're not losing people, you're losing versions of yourself that could no longer breathe in their presence. You glance at the clock, almost 11:11. Later that day, a stranger repeats the exact phrase you've been wrestling with. The next morning, a billboard carries the same word. Coincidence? Maybe once. But when life starts repeating itself, it's not decoration, it's direction. I had a client who, within 1 month, asked me the same question I had heard from 3 completely unrelated people. That was the moment I realized the world wasn't mocking me. It was pointing me toward the work I was meant to do. Think of it like footsteps echoing in a canyon. One sound feels random, but when you hear the echo again and again, it means you're in the right chamber, on the right trail. Most men ignore these nudges. They call them silly, superstitious. But the truth is, synchronicity is feedback, the alignment between your attention and your future. The more you notice, the louder it becomes. And if you dismiss it long enough, you'll miss the door it was trying to show you. Life doesn't send you polite emails. It prefers pop-up ads in your head at 3 a.m. Here's a practice. For 7 days, keep a pattern log. Write down the words, numbers, or moments that repeat. At the end of the week, ask, what decision were these signs pushing me to face? The universe doesn't repeat itself to tease you. It repeats until you finally remember who you are. Just when you think you're finally breaking through, the ground shakes. Projects collapse. People withdraw. Doors slam shut, one after another. Most men panic here. They think the universe has turned hostile. But often this is the pressure right before the diamond is born. The bigger the blessing, the bigger the test. And if you run now, you'll never know what was waiting one step beyond the pain. I've lived it. Every plan failing at the same time, every door refusing to open. Looking back, those storms didn't destroy me. They stripped me down until only the essential remained. That furnace shaped a man who could carry the weight of the next chapter. But here's the wisdom. Not every obstacle means push harder. Some are signals to pause, to ask if the battle still belongs to you. The test is twofold. First, endurance. Will you keep going when it's hard? Second, discernment. Will you recognize when resistance is protecting you from a path that no longer fits? Think of it like a river. Sometimes the current tests your strength, daring you to cross. Other times, the current warns you, this isn't your crossing point. True strength is knowing the difference. Practice this week. Take one major obstacle and ask two questions. Does this struggle still align with who I want to become? If ego were silent, would I still choose this fight? If yes, push through with everything you've got. If no, release it before it drains you further. So let me ask you, which of your current obstacles is life's way of testing your resolve, and which is its way of asking you to finally change direction? You've seen the signs. Now comes the sacred work, to become the man who can walk through them without losing his center. Most men take better care of their car than their own mind. I've been guilty of it too. That's the trap. We polish the outside, but neglect the relationship that matters most, the one with ourselves. Think about it. If a friend constantly broke his promises to you, canceled at the last minute, or spoke to you with disdain, would you still trust him? Most of us would walk away. Yet how often do you do the same to yourself, then expect self-respect to survive? Here's your practice for today. Keep one promise to yourself, no matter how small. It could be as simple as going to bed at the time you said you would. One kept promise is worth more than 100 empty ones. So let me ask you, if the man you are today were your closest friend, would he trust you to keep your word? And if not, which promise will you finally keep tonight? Let's be honest. Most of us have said yes while every part of us was screaming no. Then we sat there resentful, trapped in conversations or obligations we never wanted. That isn't kindness. That's self-betrayal disguised as politeness. Boundaries aren't walls, they're instructions. They teach people how to treat you. Without them, your yes becomes invisible, expected, assumed, taken for granted. I once had a colleague who was too nice to ever push back. Every extra task landed on his desk, while his own work stalled. He wasn't failing because of talent. He was failing because he refused to draw the line where he ended and others began. And it's not just men. I remember a woman who always answered family calls, even during her busiest work hours. She thought it was love, but really it was fear. Fear of seeming cold, fear of disappointing. The result? Burnout, resentment, and ironically, less genuine love left to give. Here's your practice this week. Choose one boundary and pre-decide it. No work calls after dinner. No toxic conversations at family gatherings. No apologizing for resting when you need it. Whatever you pick, write it down and honor it like law. Think of boundaries like road signs. Without them, the traffic of other people's demands crashes straight into your life. With them, the road is clear. You can finally move toward your own destination without collisions. Only you can answer this. What one boundary, if held firm this week, would instantly raise the respect you command, not just from others, but from yourself? But here's the question. If you never draw the line, how will anyone know where you end and they begin? I once accepted so many quick calls in a single week that my calendar looked like a barcode. It wasn't impressive, it was exhausting. That's the hidden cost of handing out yes after yes. You disappear in your own schedule. Energy is life's true currency. Lose money and you can rebuild. Lose energy and even the smallest task feels like climbing a mountain with weights on your ankles. Marcus Aurelius called it guarding the inner citadel. That citadel is your energy. Every careless yes is leaving the gates unguarded. What most people forget is this. Every yes is secretly two decisions, the one you see and the one you don't. Say yes to the meeting that doesn't matter, and you're also saying no to the workout, the rest, the project that could change your life. No is never just rejection. No is protection. Think of your energy like the queen in chess. If you move her on every small play, chasing every request, by the time the real battle arrives, you've already lost your greatest piece. But guard her carefully, and she becomes the force that decides everything. But if you choose carefully where the water flows, it powers mills, it grows fields, it sustains life. One guarded no can save 10 wasted yeses. I once knew a man who agreed to every late-night request from his boss. He thought it proved loyalty. But within months, his health crumbled, his family grew distant, and his work lost quality. He didn't lose because of weakness. He lost because his no was missing. And here's the reversal no one expects. When you finally say no with clarity, people respect you more. Because a yes without strength is invisible. But a no with conviction, that draws a line, and people feel the weight of it. Every no you honor is a seed of self-respect. Water it daily, and your life will grow cleaner, quieter, stronger. Some people treat you like a priority at first, then quietly downgrade you to an option. And the hardest part? You stay telling yourself the old version of them will return. But memory is not a contract. It cannot hold your worth. I once knew a woman who excused every slight from her partner. She told herself he was stressed, that he'd improve, that maybe her standards were too high. But the truth was simpler. His actions had stopped matching his words. Every extra month she stayed wasn't love, it was delay. And I knew a man who clung to friends that drained him. They mocked his dreams, dismissed his struggles, yet he kept showing up, hoping their loyalty would eventually match his. It never did. In the end, it wasn't betrayal that broke him. It was his own refusal to leave the table where his value was no longer seen. The conflict hidden in plain sight is this: you cannot claim to value yourself while investing in someone who repeatedly shows you they don't. Real care doesn't need decoding. It's steady, visible, consistent. Anything less is not devotion, it's habit. Think of it like wearing shoes 2 sizes too small. At first, the squeeze feels tolerable, but over time, every step warps your posture, damages your stride, and leaves scars that outlast the shoes. Staying in relationships that don't honor you is the same. You shrink to fit where you no longer belong. Be honest, are you staying because of love or just because of memory? Here's your shift. When words and actions don't match, believe the actions. They're the only part of the story that cannot lie. And the longer you stay in denial, the more you pay interest on someone else's neglect. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, are you staying because of love or only because of memory? And if it's just memory, is it worth the weight of your future? You can't carry new peace with hands still clinging to expired love. Release gently and keep walking. Many men carry their mistakes like unpaid debts, replaying the same scene at 2 a.m. The words said in anger, the chances not taken, the weakness exposed. But guilt doesn't pay the bill. It only chains you to a moment that no longer exists. Guilt is loyalty to a version of yourself that has already expired. You are no longer that man, yet you keep bowing to his ghost. Seneca wrote, "The greatest obstacle to living is the expectation of tomorrow." I'd add, the second greatest is worshiping yesterday. Holding on to yesterday's errors robs you of today's strength. I once met a business owner who lost everything in one reckless deal. For years, he introduced himself as the guy who blew it. His failure had become his surname. But the day he reframed it, not as a verdict, but as tuition, was the day he began to rebuild. And I've seen the same with a woman who carried shame over a broken marriage. She replayed every fight, every word, every mistake as if reliving them could rewrite the ending. It couldn't. The moment she shifted from asking, "Why did I fail?" to "What did I learn?" her story changed. The same pain that once chained her became the proof she could endure, grow, and start again. Think of mistakes like broken bricks in a wall. Left shattered, they weaken the whole structure. But if you gather them, reshape them, and lay them again, they become part of a stronger foundation. Your past errors are not rubble to bury you, but material to build with. Try this practice tonight. Write down one mistake you keep replaying, then rewrite it in a single line as a lesson. Don't just cross it out, transform it into fuel. Because the past cannot be erased, but it can be reforged. And that's where most men lose. If a close friend had made the same mistake, would you demand he stay guilty forever? Or would you urge him to rise and keep going? Why treat yourself with less compassion? Forgiveness isn't permission to forget. It's the courage to remember without poison. Confidence isn't lightning striking from the sky. It's bricklaying, one small action stacked on another until the structure stands tall on its own. Most men wait to feel ready before they move, but readiness doesn't come first, movement does. I once promised myself I'd get back into the gym after a long break. Day one, I was clumsy, weaker than I remembered, and tempted to quit. But here's what surprised me. By week 3, it wasn't the weights that grew heavier. It was my belief that grew lighter. The doubt had less grip because I'd shown up enough times to prove it wrong. And I remember a woman who dreamed of writing a book. For years, she said, "When I'm inspired, I'll begin." The inspiration never came until one day she forced herself to write a single page. One page became 5. 5 became chapters. Confidence didn't arrive before the work. It arrived because of the work. Think of it like carving an ice sculpture. At first, every strike feels fragile, even pointless. The block seems solid, unchanging. But stroke by stroke, the shape begins to appear. Confidence is the same. Fragile in the beginning, but only revealed to those who keep chiseling before the moment melts away. By the time the tree appears above ground, the strength has already been built below. Confidence grows the same way, unseen, until one day it stands unshakable. Epictetus wrote, "If you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Growth is awkward at first. You'll sweat, you'll stumble, you'll look unpolished. But every act of persistence is a vote for the man or woman you are becoming. Here's the hidden cost no one talks about. What step have you delayed because you were waiting to feel ready? And what would shift if you stopped waiting and simply moved forward today? The universe doesn't reward perfection, it rewards participation. Keep showing up. We live in a culture that magnifies what's missing. More money, more status, more recognition. But fulfillment doesn't arrive through constant addition. It begins with noticing the wealth already in your hands. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." The same applies inwardly. Think back, how many storms have you already walked through with nothing but resilience, patience, or courage? Those qualities didn't vanish when the storm ended. They live in you now, even if you never name them out loud. I once knew a man who felt insignificant compared to his more successful friends. He thought gratitude was too simple to matter. But the day he wrote down 5 things about himself he respected, his persistence, his loyalty, his endurance, his honesty, his humor, he realized he'd been rich all along, just blind to his own treasure. And I knew a woman who often compared herself to others on social media. Every scroll left her feeling smaller. But when she began ending each day by writing one reason she was proud of herself, whether showing patience with her child or finishing a hard task, the comparisons lost their grip. Gratitude didn't make her stop striving, but it gave her a stable floor to rise from. Think of gratitude like a mirror that reflects not what you lack, but what you already hold. Without it, you chase endlessly and never arrive. With it, you start each day anchored, Not desperate, but abundant. That's the moment of truth. When was the last time you looked in the mirror and said, without conditions, I am enough, even as I keep becoming more? And what would change if you started tonight? Gratitude is the quiet form of mastery. When you thank life not because it's easy, but because it's yours. If even one of these 8 signs has stirred something in you, don't brush it aside. Change rarely arrives with trumpets. It comes quietly, disguised as restlessness, loss, chaos, or calm. But if you have noticed these signals, your life is already shifting. The only question left is whether you'll meet it awake or let it pass while you sleepwalk. At the end of all these shifts, it comes down to one truth. The world will treat you the way you treat yourself. If you ignore your own needs, so will they. If you break your own boundaries, others will too. But if you value yourself consistently, quietly, firmly, you set a standard no one else can lower. Loving yourself more than anyone else doesn't mean closing off. It means you finally love from a place of strength, not desperation. It means your happiness no longer hangs on applause, and your peace no longer shatters at rejection. And if you're still here, it tells me one thing. You're ready to stop borrowing worth and start owning it. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Mastery doesn't begin with conquering the world. It begins with conquering the mirror. The way you speak to yourself, the way you honor your promises, the way you guard your energy. These are the foundations of freedom. Think of self-worth like the roots of an ancient tree. Unseen, quiet, buried deep, but everything above ground depends on them. When your roots are neglected, the branches wither in every storm. But when your roots are nourished, even the harshest winds only prove your strength. And here's the reversal most never expect. When you stop chasing validation, you start attracting it. When you no longer beg for respect, people sense it, and they adjust. Not because you demanded, but because you embodied. So as you leave this video, carry one reminder. You don't need permission to value yourself. Not tomorrow, not after the next success, not when someone else approves. Start now, because when you do, every connection you build, every goal you pursue, will flow from a foundation no one can shake. And if you found value here, subscribe and stay with me. We'll keep building that foundation together, one shift at a time. There comes a point when even wisdom goes quiet. Not because it has nothing left to say, but because you've finally understood. You no longer chase the signs. You live them. You no longer demand proof. You are the proof. When the applause fades and the world grows still, you'll realize this silence was never empty. It was home.